Welcome to a Bestow TV production. If you enjoy our content, please click the subscribe button. To get notifications of new releases, ring that bell. Thank you, and away we go.
What's your thoughts on the Obama administration, the Republicans, and all that stuff going on?
Bestow Productions presents Creative Continuity at New York Comic Con 2013. Get the latest news directly from artists, writers, and the occasional celebrity appearance. Tune in for Creative Continuity's coverage of NYCC. We bring the convention to you.
I mean, is really giving the finger a solution to all those types of things? Nicola Scott.
Hi everybody. I could always draw. My mother was an artist, my grandmother was an artist, so the culture was there in my family. And I used to go to life drawing classes when I was really young, and it was something that I had a natural affinity for. I used to draw, all my favorite characters all the time, but all my characters that I fell in love with came from television.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what introduced me to superheroes. I was being introduced to Wonder Woman and Batman and Superman in the same way that I was being introduced to Genie and Bewitched and all that kind of stuff. So I just used to draw all the characters that I liked. But by far Wonder Woman was my favorite fictional character. She meant more to me than any of the Disney princesses or anybody else. And it wasn't until I was much older that I actually knew that comic books existed. And it took me a while to sort of understand them and the continuity that they came from, and that they're actually the source material, and that's why they're different from the TV shows. And it was a good long while before I decided to draw comics, and it just came out of feeling a desperate need to find a genuine career path. Knowing that it really should be something creative because I'm a creative person, and knowing that I could draw, so what the hell could I do with that? And I just thought, God, it'd be fun if I could draw Wonder Woman every day. She's my favorite. And as soon as I thought that, I was like, holy, that's a job. That's a real job. Someone has that job, drawing Wonder Woman every day. I want that job.
What was your first monthly work you got from DC?
It was Birds of Prey.
Okay.
I got that at San Diego Comic-Con on the showroom floor. I'd gone to the show that year. I've been to San Diego every year. And that year I had gone with the goal of being able to get something that was more than 2 or 3 issues in a row, because I'd never done more than 2 or 3 of anything in a row, and I just wanted to see if I could handle it. And on the Sunday afternoon I met Mike Carlin, and he said, "Are you ready to start?" And I just went, "Oh God, yeah, okay." And so the first script was there when I got home. I was really lucky. It was issue 100, so I was already starting on a landmark issue. And I thought that was just a trial run. I didn't know how long it would go for, but I got it in on time, and he sent me the script for the next one, and then the next one. Then he started talking about the next issue. And before long, people started talking about me as the regular artist. And I was like, I'll just keep my mouth shut and hope that no one notices that I'm not meant to be here.
How did that transition you then into Secret Six?
Well, Gail left after 8 issues of Birds of Prey, and Sean McKeever came on, and then Tony Bedard came on. And I stayed with the book for about a year. Gail had gone off to do Wonder Woman. And then she started talking to me about doing a new ongoing of Secret Six. And because Secret Six had appeared in one of our story arcs, she just sort of said, would you be interested in doing it? Because, I think you'd be great for the book. And I said I'd love to, and so I asked my editor how he felt about me leaving and doing Secret Six, and he was like, "I'm going to be sad to see you go, but sure, I understand." And that transition was actually one of the easiest, and I was going to stay on that book for a long time. I planned on staying on it for at least 2 years. But halfway through my third arc, or my second arc, I can't remember. I only did up to issue 14. I was at San Diego Comic Con. I was chatting at the bar with a couple of DC bigwigs. I was chatting to Dan Jurgens and Mike Carlin. And Dan Jurgens said to me, what would you like to be working on? And I said, I'd love to work on Wonder Woman with Greg Rucka. And he said, he's doing Blackest Night Wonder Woman. You should see if you can do that. And I was like, yeah, that was announced ages ago. Don't they have an artist attached already? He said, I don't know, you never know. And as we were talking, Jeff Johns walked by, and he just tapped him on the shoulder, and he said, "Is there anyone drawing Black as Night Wonder Woman?" He went, "No." He said, "Oh, you should get Nicola to do it." And he went, "Oh yeah, good idea." And that was that. So before I knew that job happened, I was at a convention. I'd been commissioned to do a sketch of Wonder Woman and Batman making out, and Greg Rucka just happened to be sitting next to me, and he saw me drawing it, and he said, "I want you to do one of those for me." And I was like, "You write it into a book and I'll draw it for you and you can have the page." And he went, "You know what? I could probably put that in the end of issue 2 of Black as Night Wonder Woman." I was like, "No, you won't. How can you do that?" And he was like, "Because, you know, it's going to be her being really honest about who she loves. That's going to break the spell."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, you're never going to get that through editorial." And he was like, "Just watch me." Because there's a lot of, from what I understand, there's a lot of Batman Wonder Woman shippers in the office. The whole point of Earth 2 is that it is a considerably more damaged Earth than the regular Earth, and that is the nature of it. It is cosmically got bad karma. You know, every victory that they have is usually at some great sacrifice. And it's not like we're trying to do some hard, gritty, you know, devastating story where we don't want happiness for anybody. It's just that generally the planet is
maybe darker,
damaged, and it's darker, and what's underlying is that it's a planet that hasn't really ever been okay. You know, that it has been occupied. It has had apocalypse influence the whole time.
Yeah.
You know, we've been, from the very beginning, we've been putting in little bits of information like technology that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
From the very first issue, there are fire pits on this planet.
Yeah.
We just cracked Russia off the planet. You know, it's a planet that's coping with the fact that it's not actually a safe place to live.
Yeah.
And you know, there are very few victories that aren't achieved with a great expense.
How much interaction do you guys have now with Tom on the book, with Paul Levitz and his group of guys? He is rotating artist, but
we tend to be reasonably isolated. You know, it's almost all the conversations that are happening are between Tom, myself, and the editor, Mike Cotton. And because we're in our own universe, where we kind of have the freedom to do what we want to do. You know, Paul, even though the characters he's working on are from Earth 2, he's in the primary universe.
he is, yeah.
And I'm presuming at some point they'll eventually come back. But the longer it is, the more heartbreaking it's going to be when they get back. Because they will have been away for a long time, and a lot will have changed. A lot will have changed. Because when they left, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman had only just died. And they thought that they'd save the day. And since then, a lot of shit's gone down. All the you know, the apocalypse stuff, that is central. There's not multiples of that. So they cross over into the different Earths. They seem to have more access to us.
Yeah.
Whether or not we're literally going to have crossover at some point, I'm sure there'll be a crossover down the line. But again, the longer we can stretch it out before we let it happen, the more of an impact it will have. But yeah, there are sort of still questions at play of who's who. You know, like who Fury's father is.
Yeah.
Is someone that has a certain impact in the main DC universe.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is crossover. It's just we're not always aware of what it is. But we're, you know, as creators, we're aware of where these little moments are, and when they come to light, it's going to be an even bigger deal.
All right, thank you, Miss Scott.
That's my pleasure.
Season 1, you know, the fact that we got 16 episodes to tell the story was the key. You need enough time to tell what this tale is in the first book. So that was the most important thing. And you know, the rest is just a matter of execution, because we have the story, we have the characters, adaptation is a different discipline than creating, a series from scratch. So you're exercising a different muscle as you're sitting in the writer's room and you're putting the story up on the board. It's like, here is the book version of this story. Okay, how do we divide this up into 16 hours? What's the beginning, middle, and ends of each individual episode? What's this episode about in particular? How do we structure this? Do we take that scene? There are scenes that are really memorable in the book that fans go, oh yeah, I love that moment. And then you look at the actual book, and it might be only half a page, but it's a really memorable thing. So then we say, well, can we expand that? Let's play that even bigger. Let's embroider around the edges of it and get to that moment that everyone's looking for. So it's a different task. You're trying to be. Our job is to be as faithful to the book as we can. That's something Starz said to us directly. Chris Albrecht read the book himself, which is who does that?
Unheard of.
I know. It's like, and he said to me, he said, we believe in the book, trust the book, make the show for the fans. And just trust that anyone who's not read the book will be swept up in the story like everybody else. So that was great. And I just said, perfect. So now we know what we're doing. Our job is to go and realize the material. It's not to reinvent the material. It's not to do a new version of it. It's to do this material. What's the best visual version of Outlander can we produce? I mean, I love history and I love historical fiction. And, I think that there's actually a pretty wide crossover between genre fans, and they're almost all historians. I mean, I found this over and over again. Star Trek fans, Battlestar fans, you start talking to any of them at an event like this, and sure enough, they'll all know a lot about history. And so I think it's not as big a leap as you might think it is.
Right.
There's a lot of people who just love sci-fi who just are fascinated with various different cultures, because the past is an alien world in a lot of ways. And so much of science fiction is basically riffing on old cultures that, Battlestar was using a lot of tropes from the past, so did Star Trek. So it really wasn't that big of a stretch for me. And, I was attracted to it just because it's a good story. I mean, I read the book. It was a page turner, and I was compelled, and I was drawn into it. And I just thought, I like this. I want to see this. I'd like to write these things. I mean, I think this is a fairly straight narrative. It's Game of Thrones is a very successful show, obviously, but it's a very complex show. It's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different storylines, a lot of characters and kingdoms, and a whole bunch of complicated material. This is a single narrative, and I don't think there's anyone who won't be able to follow the story. And I just think it's an engaging story. I don't think you need to have read the books to be engaged by the story of Claire. What happens to this woman in this world that she finds herself in. I don't think those are mutually exclusive things in this case.
Yeah. No, it's fairly simple. The books encompass so many different genres that it's often difficult for me to explain, what kind of book is this, because it's not a kind of book, it's, a story. And so I've found that the only way of selling the book to someone is either to give them free samples, essentially, little snippets, which I've done for years and years, or to just begin telling them the story. In 1946, a British ex-combat nurse named Claire Randall goes to the Scottish Highlands on a second honeymoon. She and her husband have been separated by the war for 6 years. They're getting reacquainted, thinking of starting a family. While they're there, though, she goes out walking by herself one day in the woods, finds a circle of standing stones, and as she walks through the circle, she disappears back into 1743, where the first person she meets is a man in an 18th century army officer's uniform who looks just like her husband and turns out to be his 6 times great-grandfather. Unfortunately, he also turns out to be a sadistic bisexual pervert, and while trying to get away from him, she falls into the hands of a gang of Scots who are also trying to get away from him for other reasons. Well, finding an English woman wandering around the countryside in what looks to them like her underwear. She's wearing a 1940s house dress. They scoop her up and take her to their castle to find out who and what she is. Well, the lad, Captain Randall, her husband's ancestor, is also very interested in finding out who and what she is. And in the fullness of time, she's forced to marry one of the young clansmen to avoid being handed over to Captain Randall. So she's trying to escape from the Scots, get back to the Standing Stone Circle, and her husband of the 18th century. She's being pursued by Blackjack Randall. And she's falling in love with the young man that she's been obliged to marry. The story unfolds from there.
There you go.
Yeah.
What's not the...
And I said, no, it's a different skill set. I'm a novelist. When I work, it's completely solitary. It's all mine. I have total control over what goes into it and out of it. Script writing is much more a communal affair. It's very interactive. It evolves throughout, all the way up through the shooting. In fact, which I know, I have friends who are script writers and I've talked to them many times. I said, I'm not adapted to working that way. I won't be able probably to keep to the right timetable, be responsive and, always on demand. And the other thing is that I have books to write. I can't spare large chunks of my life to be totally involved in something like that.
First rule, Comic-Con, don't grow up. Second rule, figure a way to make money not growing up.
Watch Creative Continuity, COD Tunes, Con Rewind, Mr. Lobo Does, and more on this channel.
Creative Continuity. We bring the convention to you.